gosh, dude, I feel like my nose is going to be making a whistling sound the whole time.
Good. I haven't heard you whistle.
Flonase. All right, you ready?
Yeah, let's hit it.
Welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast with TJ and Sonny.
Hello and welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. My name is TJ McConaughey, and I am happy to join you for our 5th episode, which is incredible, awesome, all of the amazing things that you would say as a youth pastor. I'm stoked. I'm super excited. You guys are awesome. All those cliche youth pastor things all coming into this one because I got it all firing this week. We made it to 5. Joining me, as always, is my best, partially balding, good, and friendly friend, Sonny Saltalamacchia.
Let me put down this tissue real quick. TJ, it's 5. Episode 5. The podcast is alive, and adding on to those cliches, it is lit. And it is woke AF, bro. This podcast is woke AF. And TJ, that's kind of cool. We're 2 away from the threshold of whether a podcast will survive or not. And TJ, you ever catch a glimpse of your back? Once in a while, I catch a glimpse of my back, and it just reminds me of how grateful I truly am for my wife, who really has to look at it more than anybody else, bro. So I'm feeling pretty good in that. I caught a glimpse of my back earlier. I'm feeling pretty happy.
Yeah, oftentimes I take different looks at you and I think, man, Rachel has a lot of things that she has to deal with in life.
That woman is a saint. I tell you what, that woman is a saint.
I don't have to deal with that stuff. I can just be your friend and I don't have to deal with that stuff.
Let's not pretend your wife isn't a saint either, though, TJ.
Yes. Both of our wives are going to live in different neighborhoods than us in heaven, and that's just a fact.
This is true.
Anyway, Sonny, we got a lit show for everyone today. I'm pretty excited about it. What are we gonna be talking about on the show tonight?
Lit show. TJ, we got like 6 things we're doing. We got a win of the week, which is where me or you talk about the highlights of your ministry and of my prime profession. And then we talk about the tick of the week. Usually it involves the interwebs of some kind, and I'll be continuing that trend this week. Then we got an interview with your senior pastor. Apparently you needed more fortification in your job, so you decided to interview your senior pastor on the show. And actually, it was pretty cool. He definitely shares the heart of a fringe youth worker, and I was excited to listen to it and excited to talk about it with you. Mm-hmm. Following that, TJ, we have the question of the week, and I think that's your question this week. So I'm anticipating an insightful question that has to do with fringe youth work on the edges of the margins of society, and followed by what is in your office, and then we'll close out awkwardly, and I'll edit it down in post, and it'll sound nice and professional sounding.
Yes. I'm super excited for that stuff, Sonny, and I'm also super excited that you have gotten some new things in your office. Last week, you kind of brought some weak stuff. So this week, you kind of took some things and made sure that you had an office full of things so that you don't have to play the whole I'm the best thing in my office.
I live close to Target, and it was Christmas. So I went and bought myself a shelf. Bought myself a fancy little sign there, and got some cool things. I got a Dundee Award for Christmas, bro. Like, how cool is that?
Goodness.
I got a Dundee
That is super
Award.
cool.
That's pretty epic.
It's totally epic. What I have right now, the only thing that's joined me in my office is my white. This says look at this. White bean and kale soup.
What, did your insides piss you off earlier? You want to take it out on them or what?
White bean and kale soup. You know, some things have changed in my life when this appetizes. This is appetizing to me. So
did you throw away the Taco Bell wrappers in the backside of the house before you walked in with that, or what?
No.
Join the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. And when you subscribe to this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating. We desperately need your approval.
Win of the week, TJ. Win of the week. I don't know who won last week. And as I stated earlier, TJ, I don't care who won the win of the week last week, right? I'm confident in my job. I'm confident in the work I do with the youths. While I want the randos of the internet to listen to our show, I'm not dependent on the randos voting for my win of the week to be successful. So it's okay, bro. It is okay.
Oh my goodness.
So let's have you start it, TJ.
Some shows, try to avoid hypocrisy. Some shows try to not double speak.
I embrace it.
Some people, but we here at the Fringe Youth Worker podcast, we run straight into hypocrisy. We blast trolling and then we become the trolls.
Yes.
We get mad at people who get mad at people online, and we get mad at people online. And then the most recent thing, which is on our Instagram page, which actually has got quite a few likes on it right now, is you telling the randos of the world that you don't care about their opinion. Which is something we also covered on a previous show. Like, we all care what people think on the show.
Of course, everybody cares.
But we're doing this podcast and putting it out to randos, and your big thing was, I don't care what randos think.
Well, but here's the context, and maybe I didn't clarify.
Yeah.
If you're confident in what you do with the kids that you work with, whoever God gives you as far as youth work, that's all that matters. If you're getting results and it's effective, that is the most important thing that matters. It doesn't matter who you got to impress, who you got to, whatever. Obviously, we all have to give an account to somebody. We have to do that to our supervisors and whatever. But if what you're doing is effective, who cares what some rando on the internet says about your ministry and stuff like that? That's all I was saying. Now, it's a double-edged sword because we want the randos to listen. But maybe, TJ, maybe our hope is to turn the randos into relation dose. I don't know how he would say that, but
relation dose. I think we just found the name of this episode.
Or the what
relation dose.
What are we calling listeners? Fringeonians or fringelings or
Fringe fries. You know what we're gonna do this week is we're gonna come up with like a list of 5 or 6 of these things, and then we're gonna allow our listeners to vote on the name that we're going to call them. It's gonna be an epic little poll. So make sure after you listen to this thing, you go vote for what we will call you on the show. And that sounded pretentious.
Yes, vote for what you want us to call you. Yes, that's a great way. Now back to the win of the week business here, TJ. What's your win of the week?
Win of the week. This is a crazy busy week, and I'm going to get into that more in tick of the week. Christmas for pastors and youth pastors and people who work in churches is crazy. It is crazy. And even the churches that are like, we're going to simplify everything. We're going to make it just dark and candlelit, and we're going to just have a cello playing nice in background, and we're going to have just an acoustic. All of that is production. Like the stuff that sometimes when you come in, like, wow, this is so refreshing, it's so simple. It still takes a ton of work to make you feel like your church is simple. So no matter what, the people working at the church, whether it's a simple production or whether it's a crazy production, they all end up working ungodly amounts of hours to pull these things off. And so in the grind of all of that, Christmas also has to happen at my house and at my family and all the other stuff and the traditions and all that stuff. And so you end up talking to family members who you don't get to always talk to, and namely you get to talk to in-laws. And I always think it's funny when you start talking about your in-laws on the show because, there's a chance they could listen.
I was just gonna say.
This is gonna be a good thing though. If you are listening and now you're cringing, you're like, oh no, what's he gonna say about me? So I got a chance to talk to Britt's grandpa, and Britt's grandpa has been somebody who's been a big blessing to Britt and I throughout our marriage, and has done a lot of awesome things. It did take him a while to warm up to me, and I think that's mostly because he has an awesome granddaughter and couldn't see any kid, any man-child wanting to or being able to marry her or being good enough. And I still don't feel like I'm that person, but it took him a while to warm up to me. But he's since come around, and it's been a big blessing in our lives. However, I've never heard him say what he said to me this week. And it was really, 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 really cool. It made me feel like a golden retriever getting petted. You know that feeling? Just like, oh, yes.
Actually, I don't. I've never been petted on the back of my neck before, but go ahead.
You have so much hair back there. It probably feels so good.
Did he pet you? Did he really
No.
pet you and say this?
No, you know,
Here's a piece of bologna with no medicine on the inside.
Aren't you a mandatory reporter? Wouldn't you have to report that if I had?
Yeah,
well, I guess
you're over 18. You're not an incapacitated adult, or maybe you are. You took a special test once, but anyway.
I don't know. Anyway, so I had one of those moments where and it was revolving around this podcast, this show, and some of this content we've done on here. And he looked at me and he said, "I really, really like your podcast." And I was like blown away that he was listening, first of all, and that, that he was, taking the time to do these things. And I'm still not sure if he's listening to it or just kind of listening to the 1-minute messages that we're putting out there. I'm kind of confused on his involvement, but he said, "I really, really like it. And I'm proud of you. Really, really proud of you."
That's cool.
And I don't know what it is about an older man telling a younger man, "Hey, I'm proud of you." But that is one of the coolest experiences that you can experience as a human being, and particularly as a man. And it was really, really cool and satisfying to sit there and have him kind of quote back to me and tell me the different friends that he's showing this to and all the different things. And this is a guy who's accomplished a lot in his life, a guy who's got a lot of wisdom, a guy that I look up to in a lot of ways. So when somebody who you look up to in a lot of ways looks back at you and says, "Hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you're doing," that means you're on the right track. That means that you're doing something special. And if we accomplish nothing else with this podcast, which I hope we do accomplish way more with this podcast, being told, "Hey, I'm proud of you for what you're doing," that was special. That was awesome. And that would be good enough for me. So that's awesome. But that's my win of the week.
That's solid, man. And I think, I don't think there's a young man. I mean, let me back it up. For the most part, all young men crave, and this isn't a weird, creepy, any kind of way like this. All young men crave the approval or right of manhood or passage of manhood from the older males in their life,
Yeah.
And then I think especially even more talking about fringe kids, when you don't have that at home, or you didn't find that in school, or didn't find that in a coach, or didn't find that with an uncle, or your dad wasn't around, or you didn't have an older brother, it becomes all the more important to have that older male speak validation into your life, so to say. And in addictions counseling, they refer to that person as a cookie person. It's the person in your life who maybe you grew up, you had a lot of trauma, a lot of bad things happen in your life. And then when you became an adult, you had somebody in your life who was there to just give you an encouragement. Like, "Here's a cookie, great job." It's kind of a weird name for it, but it's just that person who always offers encouragement, sees what you're doing, recognizes it, and just gives you encouragement, And and I think sometimes anybody who works with youth, we try to get into we get in the weeds on it, like, how do we attract kids to the ministry? How do we attract kids to the program? How do we keep kids in the program? How many times do we text them before we stop texting them? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But really, I think encouragement always goes so far. Especially to those fringe kids who don't hear it a lot. And I think of so many names in my head right now of clients I've worked with throughout the years who just get told they're pieces of blank at their house. And a simple thing of encouragement goes a long, long way. And so that's awesome, man. That must have felt pretty good.
And that's so true. And it's something to remember as you parent. I know we have actually a lot of collective of parents listening to this podcast, which was a surprise to me and Sonny. And it actually is making us kind of pivot on the wording of how we're, producing these things. So thank you if you're a parent and you're joining and you're here to listen to a couple yahoos talk about ministering to fringe kids. But that's one of the things that I think is so important, especially as you get into the hard years and you start looking at your kid, or maybe looking at your family and your family systems and realizing that maybe your family is a fringe family. and you're trying to reverse some generational sin, you're trying to repent of that, you're trying to give your kid the best legacy, but you realize that maybe even the legacy you're leaving is a little bit more broken than what you'd want it to be. Here's a really easy trick, a really easy hack is instead of always condemning the bad behavior, approve the good behavior.
Yeah,
look for ways to encourage your kid. Look for ways to encourage him or her in what they're doing, and make sure that they know these are the things that you do that make me proud of you. And in the rigmarole of parenting and youth work and all of that stuff, sometimes that goes to the wayside. It's like, well, you should do these things automatically.
Yeah,
I can tell you one thing, man, as a youth worker and a parent, don't go to that place. Don't go to that reasoning is, I shouldn't even have to tell you. Don't do that. Parenting is about telling your kids stuff. And as much as we have to correct behavior, we should affirm behavior all the more. So look for ways to affirm your students, look for ways to affirm your kids, and you'll see that they'll start to lean more into those things, because being told, you make me proud, man, that's a drug.
Yeah. How much more are you hyped about doing the podcast now? Yeah. Outside of, the decent feedback we're getting from the randos on the internet, but how much more did that mean coming from a guy you respect, that's family, that loves you, and has your best interest at heart, and something you're doing in a creative space, you're putting yourself out there, to have him validate you probably just motivates the heck out of you to do it, right?
It totally motivates me, and the fact that he might be listening to this is so incredibly cool. And we kind of diss the randos who are listening to the show, like, or at least you did. I don't like to isolate our listening.
Maybe that's the name. We just call them the randos.
The randos. Oh, ooh.
That could be it.
That's fire. That's fire right there. But that's one of the things that's really special for me about this podcast. I talked about that a little bit, is when we pop back up online, the different students who were in our past who all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to be listening. But man, the people in your life that mean the most to you are oftentimes people that you already have a relationship with, and to do something that makes them proud, that's special. That's super cool.
It's a good win of the week.
Like I said, turns you into a golden retriever, just wanting to be patted on the head.
So they take you out back and shoot you because you're not listening because you're too old.
You start dragging your butt on their carpet, and that's a different story. But
all right,
that was last Christmas.
Good win of the week. I kind of got two. They're not really. I mean, I don't know. They're both kind of cool, but one of them was
whoa! You've been pulling the whole I get 2 win of the weeks every week. Is that just is that a security thing? Like, I'm winning so hard in life, I can't pick them. Is that what you're doing here? Is this all I do is win moment?
My life is lit AF, bro. Okay. It's hard enough to boil it down to only 2. No, just kidding. All right, I'll go with one.
Hey, church people, don't look up what AF is, please.
I hate the people who actually use those phrases on a day-to-day basis. Like, if you're 32 and lit and AF and woke is in your vocabulary on a daily basis, knock it off. What are you doing?
You
can mock it, but knock it off.
We're gonna get to that a little bit.
All right, my win of the week, very simple. I can't get into too much details about the clients I work with and stuff like that, but recently I was told by one of my coworkers, Casey. She's a counselor. Great coworker.
She's cool.
Yeah, you met her. She told me that this girl we've known for, I think 2 years now, recently got off probation. I think as of yesterday, so as of, I think, Wednesday or something like that. And the cool thing about it, and again, I can't go too deep into her story, but I remember first meeting her, first working with her, and it was literally having conversations about why she should even care about her life. To now, it's like the little things in life that most teenagers care about, she's caring about. The driver's license and job and boyfriends and graduating early and stuff like that. She's bought in. She's seen the value in life and just done a complete 180. And I wish I could tell you all the details, because it's one of those stories that'll just make you kind of choke up and cry. But she's just done such a huge turnaround, and it's encouraging, because so many times, at least in our world, you work with kids and maybe you don't see the results right away, or they end up going a real negative, bad route. And
Yeah.
Over the years, I've seen a lot of kids kind of go that route and get further in the system, further entrenched, go to youth correctional programs and people that, you care about so much and you pour your heart into and you just love on them day in, day out and offer them encouragement. And it's such a one-sided relationship at times, because you give. And the next thing you know, they're gone and you hear they got locked up for something because they had a gun charge or something like that,
Dang.
And it breaks your heart. And so to hear about this one girl in particular, oh man, it was so cool. And it was so encouraging. I have had that the whole week off, and Casey texted me to let me know because I'd be stoked about it. And it's almost just like, it's like recharge me. I still have like 5 days off before I go back to work, but I'm kind of like, I want to go back now. I'm recharged. Kind of like in the same way your grandpa-in-law speaking life into you through the podcast, seeing a kid get it and turn it around, just like recharges your batteries. And you always said. And I always remember this: we serve out of an abundance of our heart, and seeing those life changes, that makes it like worthy to fight again,
Yeah, and man, there's so much there. There's so many good things there. First of all, the idea of the abundance is when you're in youth worker and you're giving and giving and giving. You want to always try to serve out of an abundance. You want your relationship with God and your self-care and your family to constantly be pouring into you, so much so that it's an abundance, that it overflows. And that's where you serve others out of, is an overflow. You're not emptying out yourself constantly in order to fill other people up. And those moments, like hearing about a kid who does it right, man, that stuff that'll overflow you for days. That's something that'll recharge everything, and you'll have enough to give to a lot of kids who maybe don't deserve it as much. Watching that thing, and the other thing that I was told this when I first started youth ministry, when I first got out of college and I was raring to go. There was a veteran youth pastor in my youth pastor network, and I remember him saying this, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but it stuck with me. It's one of those things that just didn't. And he just said, there's a lot of heartbreaks in youth ministry. There's a lot of heartbreaks in youth ministry. And I was just getting started, so I understood what he was saying, but I didn't grasp it. It was like, well, maybe that was you, but that's not going to be me.
Yeah. I'm going to save the world. I don't know what you're talking about. Man.
Yeah. Come on.
They've never met me before, bro. Come on.
Have you heard? I'm TJ McConaughey.
I gave a great speech once in my class at college. Come on.
That's right.
Come on. I'm bringing it.
My peers think I'm pretty awesome.
I do my sermons over burritos, bro. Come on.
Come on. I'm on the fringe. I'm on the edge. But anyway, no, I remember thinking, well, that's you. That's not going to be me. But man, now that I'm in my 12th year, there's nothing that's been more true in my ministry, man. There's just a lot of kids that you pour so much into, and you don't ever see any fruit from it, and maybe the fruit doesn't ever happen, maybe it never takes root, but that's what makes the ones that come back and the ones that get it and the ones that you really get to actually influence in a positive way, and you can just see your influence shining through them. That's what makes those ones special.
I can't believe you're still listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.
All right, TJ,
awesome.
Tick of the week. Tick of the week. If this is your first time tuning in, this is where we offer a critique. And it can kind of come off a little bit maybe arrogant or a little bit critical, but really it's a critique on ineffectiveness that we both see in youth ministry or working with youth. Yeah. By no means do I know everything. By no means does TJ know everything. I've been doing it for a lot of years. I know it's effective as far as reaching fringe kids. Every day works with fringe kids. And so sometimes I just kind of point out things that maybe we could tweak some thinking a little bit around how we're approaching youth work here, TJ. And I got a decent one I'll start with, unless you got something raring to go.
No, you got this one. You got this one.
So, tick of the week is this. Again, it revolves around the internet. If you've been paying attention, every tick of the week comes from the internet.
Oh,
from those
Sonny.
randos.
Those
And
randos out there.
Randos are going crazy. This guy posts on a forum, on these youth pastors forums. I find myself going crazy in them. They're nuts. He says, "I have a student who's listening to 21 Pilots. Should I be concerned?"
Wait, is that on one of the youth pastor forums?
Yes. It was a legit post.
Are you sure that's legit? Because that sounds like a troll. That sounds like what you did last week.
No, I think it's 100% legit. 100%.
What if they're just trolling you right now?
If he's trolling me, I'm gonna find him. I'm gonna bring him on the podcast next week because that's an epic troll. I don't think it is. Because based on the other feedback, it's not,
about
bro.
this.
No, it's not.
Think about this. It's got the same form as yours and the other trolls.
I
My
agree.
friend is this. Should I be
agree.
concerned?
No, it was a student. It was a student is listening to 21 Pilots. They're going around saying, calling each other blurry faced and bandito, and I'm not sure it's good music for them to be listening to. 100%, straight up is what.
Were they in the comments? Were they in the comments saying, "Oh, I understand that," or was it just did they just let it go?
Oh no, they replied back. Oh yeah, no, it was a thing, bro. It's a thing. It's legit.
So this was not a troll.
This was not a troll.
Okay, all right.
This is not a troll.
So angry old Sonny, angry old man Sonny.
Well,
why does that tick you off?
Okay,
so
why
much?
it tick me off? If you're gonna work with youth, know your music. Like know who's who, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you not know 21 Pilots if you work with kids, right? I think the first year we did camp, 2015, Respawn Camp, that was when Blurry Face was huge, right?
Yeah.
We fell in love with that band. And so what I did is I sound, every time we go to camp, I always ask the kids, what music you listen to right now? What are you guys vibing to? What do you guys like? And I try to download as much as I can legally onto my phone, or I get Apple Music or whatever, and then I have it ready for them to go, right? So when we're on the boat, I'm playing music that's central to their life. And then I use that music as conversation starters, right? You leverage the culture for your own ministry or for conversation or something like that, right? Guy on Justin Herman's podcast said that, and Barry said that too. We'll get to that in a bit. You leverage the culture to gain their ear, so to say. And so 21 Pilots, they're believers, right? They're believers. They're not your Chris Tomlin, music. They're not identified as Christian music, but they're believers and they're in a band. They're kind of doing what Skillet did the second half of their career when they went to a secular label and stuff like that. And having a background in music, I was in bands all growing up. Some of the greatest opportunities we ever had to minister was when I was playing in this heavy hardcore band, and we were very anti-porn, TJ, and so we'd go into bars playing this heavy Slayer type music, screaming all that stuff, and we'd bring a positive message. And so one of the ways we would do that is we had this song called Bounce Your Eyes. And Bounce Your Eyes was about that phrase from Every Man's Battle where, don't even give your mind or your eyes the chance to be tempted. When you see something that's enticing, look away immediately. And so we talked about that in the song. And so we'd go into bars. But before that, we would never even be invited to bars if we identify as a Christian band and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't identify as that, but you are that, you can go into places you would never be able to go. So we'd go into bars, and I'd say something like, I'd say before we play the song, how many of you guys have wives or sisters? And all these drunk guys would be, yeah. How many of you guys have daughters or nieces? Yeah. And then I'd say something like, well, how many of you would want me looking at them naked? And we almost got killed a couple times.
Oh my God.
And it was always funny, man.
That's like the worst thing to say at a bar. I can't think of a worse thing,
epic.
man.
It was epic.
But all of a sudden a bottle comes just rocks you right in the face. Just like
we didn't care. We gave 0 Fs, as the kids say today, right? So we'd go in there, we'd say this.
All of the abbreviations you're bringing tonight.
Bringing them all, baby. Bringing them all.
Bringing them all.
Bringing them all. So we'd say this, and they'd be like, it'd go from, yeah, to like, what the F did this mother effer just say, And there was times where it was pretty serious. But then I'd say, what do you think porn is? What do you think every girl who's ever done a porn video, where do you think they come from, right? They all have a father. They all have a brother. And so then we get into it, and dude, we had so many awesome conversations with people that you would never have if you only kept it in the 4 church walls, man. Yeah. And so 21 Pilots, you're gonna question them. There's 2 things wrong with that. One, know your music, know what your kids are into. If you have to go onto a forum, why? Go listen to their album. Go check them out. All you gotta do is type in Google real quick. You can find everything else, everything you want to know about them, right? So know your kids' culture. Know where they're at. And then number two, and I responded to him like this, and he didn't respond back. I said, I think the bigger question you should be asking yourself is, have you trained up your kid to be able to withstand the onslaughts, if you will, of the music that's out there, right? Let alone 21 Pilots. Yeah. So what are you going to do? You're going to guard against every single band a kid listens to and say, nope, no to them, 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 yes to them. You can't do that. What you can do is you can invite your kid into the culture, provide an opportunity for them to meet and fall in relationship with Christ, and then teach them and disciple them so that way they can discern for themselves. Because you're never going to stop every temptation out there, but you can teach the kid to withstand the temptation if there is a temptation, and 21 Pilots is not the temptation, man. Give me a break, TJ. Come on.
Give me a break. Give me a break. Break me off a piece of that chicken.
I got to get off the internet, bro.
Yeah, you really do got to get off the internet.
But it's crazy, man. How do you not know? I mean, it blows my mind. How do you work with youth and not know that stuff, you know?
Well, I mean, I think that that's, unfortunately, that's a really predominant way to do this Christian culture thing. And part of it is protection. It's how much of the world can I allow my kid to be in, and we all do this to some degree, Sonny, to play the devil's advocate, like with all of our, with our own kids. We there's certain kids that come in the neighborhood and I'm like, that kid kind of back talks a lot, and I don't know if I want Max or one of my kids around them because it's like, what could happen here? So we all kind of do that to some degree of like what influencers do I want in my kid's life? And I think that I want to trust that that's where it comes from. Like, is this a good influence or is this a bad influence? And I really want to know. But it also brings up something that I read this week, which I sent it to you, but I don't know if you read it. It's called Lawnmower Parents. Lawnmower Parents. Yeah. That's the new helicopter parents.
That's epic.
Oh my gosh. And it really is this, man, is they go out before and they make sure that anything that could be seen as a problem in their kid's day is taken care of by them before their kid ever even sees it, right? They ever even see it, right? And so it was this, I think it was written by this teacher.
Yeah, it was teacher.
Yeah, so it was written by a teacher, and she had to go, she got called the office because one of her kids desperately needed something. And she's like, well, what is it? Is it an inhaler? Is it something that's vital to their everyday thing? And he gets there and it's one of those thermos water bottles, those those ones that Nalgene water bottles, and it was like, she needs this for her day. And the teacher's getting called out of her room and called out of her job because this parent has no clue that they just have no clue. They literally have no clue that the teacher has other things to do, that there's bigger goals. And the biggest thing is your kid needs a few problems in their life in order to turn out okay. And this is this thing, you talked about it. I think you talked about it last week. You said resilience, and you talked about resiliency on the show. And I think that's a huge piece of this, is that we have these parents who are knocking down any problem that our kid could ever have. Yeah. And because of that, these kids are soft and they grow up, and eventually there is problems. There's very real problems. And as a kid, they never had to deal with those. So now they're late to the party of how do I deal with it when I leave my water bottle at home? Well, that's not a huge problem to most adults, but to some people, that's a huge deal nowadays. And I think that's because of these ideas of lawnmower parents. And I think that goes to the idea of what you're talking about here, is that there's this protectionism out there. And
so the difference in the article, because I read it too, the difference between helicopter and lawnmower was that a lawnmower parent goes ahead of the kid and mows down any problem before the kid can ever face that problem. And I remember a few years ago doing youth group before you were there, a couple of parents in particular, they would do this, and now, like 7 or 8 years later, one of those kids, I'm not ragging on him, but like he's in therapy. He has, he's the kid on Facebook who's like, everybody pay attention to my diagnoses. Here's an update. His whole identity is wrapped up in his diagnosis.
Yep.
And this isn't a knock on having a diagnosis. I mean, I work in the mental health field and the addictions field, right? That stuff is real. But when your identity is wrapped up in it, and when you're so scared to have an identity outside of that, that's an issue in and of itself. And so now you have the contagion effect, where it's like popular and trendy sometimes to have a diagnosis because something is wrong with you because you've never been tested, right? And so, yes, you don't want your kid to, get black eyes every week because he falls and smashes his face, but occasionally that can be beneficial. And I always kind of talk to parents, your kid has to touch the oven. Mm-hmm. He has to. If you always tell your kid, don't touch the oven, it's hot, he's never going to understand what hot really means. So eventually he has to touch it, and you pray and you set up, parameters as a parent that when he does touch the oven, the burn isn't too bad and that it's not too severe, but there's going to be a scar to remind him this is bad, this is why I don't touch it.
Yeah, and I think that that's Britt listens to these episodes. That's kind of our philosophy of parenting. There's certain behaviors that are self-correcting. Yeah,
exactly.
If you jump off the bed and hit your head, like, you're gonna learn, hey, I shouldn't jump off the bed. Or if you hit your head hard enough, you're gonna like not remember it, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. And that's probably me in your childhood.
This is where CPS will be called on bad parenting for TJ.
I think that's actually more me in your history. Like there was, I'm just gonna ram the wall again with my head. No, dude. And I think that there is, we call it self-correcting. Like if you're gonna do that, you're gonna eventually get hurt, and it's gonna hurt, and then you're not gonna want to do it anymore. And I don't have to yell at you, so I'm just gonna sit back and let this. And again, this is a gauge. If my kids play with matches and gasoline in the kitchen, I'm not like, well, this is a self-correcting behavior, and then we all blow up, right?
Well, there go your eyelashes. You'll probably never do that again, will you?
Yeah, but there is certain things where it's like, this kid's gonna hit his head because he's jumping right underneath the counter. Like, okay, I'm gonna let him hit his head because he needs to learn that there's certain places you can't jump.
But in the end, life's natural consequences, I think, are the best educator. And I think what sometimes, and I'm a parent, I got 3 kids. Sometimes we as parents, we can't stand the thought of our child having any kind of pain or any kind of negative emotion, because what parent in their right mind would wish that, right? And if you look at today's culture, we're trying so hard to eradicate discomfort and pain, and you'll never, ever be able to do that. Because from a biblical worldview, pain is it's part of life. And even if it's not your worldview, it's part of life. And it's the best trainer we have in life, right? I grind every day at my job because I know what it's like to not have a job or to not really have a place to live, or I know that because I've suffered those consequences, and that makes me grind every single day as hard as I can to provide for my family and my wife, right? Yeah. And so really, life is the best teacher, and if we don't let life teach us, then we never learn those lessons. All right, TJ, you did an interview this week with your senior pastor, Barry Bandera.
Lead pastor,
which is just quite the cool name, Barry Bandera. Yeah. We'll listen to that interview right now, and then we'll come back and talk about it for a couple minutes.
Barry has been a youth pastor in his past for 20 plus years. Did youth ministry on a very high level. Ended up down at EV Free Fullerton.
Correct.
And it's awesome that I get to have him on my show. He also has a book called Dream House by Barry Bandera. That's right. Where can they check out your book if they're interested?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon. They have it there. So of all the years I was getting parents dropping off their teenagers, and I screwed up, fixed my kid. Once I became a lead pastor, I said, hey, I'm going to write a book on parenting, so parents can start young.
Yeah.
And so youth pastors don't have to be in rescue mode.
Man, that is one thing you get all the time as a youth pastor.
Oh, yeah.
Is parents saying, "Hey, can you fix my
You're
kid?
my last
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah, this is it.
You should have started when they were 4 years
Yeah.
old or younger.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, you're their last hope.
Yeah, that's right.
If you could see that, my job would be a whole lot easier.
What I really wanted to say, if you didn't screw up, your kids would be okay.
But buy the book anyway.
It's fun.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So Barry, I wanted to get into some Fringe youth worker stuff.
Yeah.
I'm interested in. I think our podcast is interested in youth ministry in sort of a non-conventional place. Now that's weird coming from me because I'm in a very conventional place, a church, but that's where we're kind of finding our home here. But I've watched you. For our viewers, Barry is my pastor, and so I get to
Be careful what he says, because his next paycheck is on the line here, so this better be good.
I've never been so nervous interviewing anyone. He interviewed me a few years ago, and now I'm interviewing him.
Yeah,
So
there
this
you
is
go.
it's coming full circle.
That's right.
So anyway, I'm interested. You have found a calling in being a pastor to unchurched people, and that is usually a calling that comes from being an unchurched person for most of your life.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not your story, is it?
No, I was born in the nursery, I felt like. Yeah. Grew up in San Jose, and my dad accepted Christ at 1 year old, when I was about 1 year old. But I was in church all my life. It was back then a Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And I lived in the church.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, I've known a few pastors in my day, especially senior pastors, and usually when they have that upbringing of, church all the way through, they kind of become a churchy pastor. I mean,
That's all they know, so
yeah.
they just reproduce what they experience.
So they plant on discipleship and, they chalk up different unsuccesses to people don't like their brand of discipleship or something along those lines.
Bunch of heathens. What's their problem?
Yeah, what's their deal? We're not here to bash on senior pastors, but
I have one, so I can.
You can. And so tell me where this started. What changed for you in your life that you started saying, "Hey, there's all these people and we got to reach them"?
Yeah, I'd say two significant issues that really impacted my whole passion and outlook on philosophy of ministry. One is my father. My father grew up, everywhere he turned, he was rejected. In his home, his grandparents never sent him presents. He sent his brother presents, but not him. And so he grew up feeling rejected, and then he got saved at the age of 25. And about 10 years later, he was a youth pastor, and this was in the 70s. And he took a youth pastor with no biblical training, no college background, in ministry. And he took the church I grew up in, about maybe 50 kids, and within a year they had 200 kids. Wow. And this is crazy, when youth ministry wasn't really happening. And I remember when I was going into youth ministry, he told me, and he taught me this growing up, I always felt like I was on the outside.
Huh.
And so he goes, I didn't have a budget, but why the youth ministry grew from 50 to 200 overnight is everybody mattered. And it wasn't just for the popular kids, it was for every kid. I want every student that came into my youth group knew that they were loved.
Yeah.
And that's what was the core of his youth ministry. And so then when I went into youth ministry, I was back in Liberty University, and I was asked to coach an inner city basketball team. And the whole deal was these junior high kids couldn't play in the basketball league, which they wanted to play, unless they went to junior high Sunday school. And so I'm like, I love basketball. Yeah. This is actually before I was a youth major. I was a history major. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll help. And I ended up having they were all African-American inner city kids. And the East Coast, ACC was everything, and they loved basketball. So I would round them up, and I would go into the ghetto and pick them up in my Pontiac Firebird because I wanted them in church so that we could win. And
is this the 80s or 70s?
This was the 80s, early 80s.
That's so 80s. That's so awesome.
Oh, yeah. It was a sweet car. But I just remembered I was, my West Coast guy. I was around all different ethnicities, but I didn't understand inner city. And I'm going into areas where mamas and grandmas are going, son or boy, what are you doing here? This, it's getting dusk. You best be leaving.
Yeah.
And it just opened up my whole world of what I didn't grow up with, but these kids needed Jesus.
Yeah.
And so and I took that and really had my dad's influence into my first youth ministry. And from that point on, all my youth ministries had kids on the outside became on the inside.
Yeah. And so I love that because first of all, it's coaching. And if there's something that is fringe youth worker, it is coaches.
Oh man.
And so so you kind of started in youth ministry on the Fringe. You weren't
Right.
It wasn't the traditional sort of youth group. I mean, with your dad it was, but
Right.
once you got the itch, it was
Right.
there's these kids, they need Jesus and a jump shot.
Yeah, hey, that would be nice. That would be nice.
And so you found it there and you kind of moved forward. Now here's the cool thing, and I know this about you, but they don't yet. Now you retired from youth work a little over a decade ago,
Yep.
but still to this day, you are actively involved in youth work in a non-conventional way. Why don't you go ahead and explain what that is?
Yeah, I it's amazing how I'm still coaching.
Yeah.
Started volunteering back at college. In my first youth ministry in Vancouver, I started helping at the local public junior high and ended up coaching. Took some time off, then I got back into coaching with my daughters, but now I'm in the public schools. I've been in 2 public schools recently. I'm the assistant girls basketball coach, and so I love it. Oh, and because I get to teach a game that I love, and I get to be around students that I still love.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't have dads.
Yeah.
Some of our players have dads in prison, and don't know them.
Yeah.
And I get to love on them.
Yeah.
And they know I'm a pastor.
Yeah.
But they know me as Coach B. And they know that Coach B loves them. And that's not just them. Their parents know, and their grandparents know that Coach B loves them. So I can't get students out of my system.
Oh man, that is so cool. I mean, and especially if you are a coach and you're listening to this podcast, we'd like to hear from you. Go ahead and comment, get part of the discussion on
Huge
Instagram
influence.
and Facebook.
Oh my.
I contend this that most youth workers aren't youth pastors. Most people have this heartbeat for seeing the next generation succeed, and even seeing the next generation succeed in their relationships with God. Most of these people aren't paid. They don't have the credentials behind their names. They're just out there doing it because something in their heart just said, this is where I want to be at. And so I want to kind of ask you, how do you walk that line? Because we live here in Bremerton, Washington. And Bremerton, Washington actually got on national news in the past few years because a coach started praying after games, right? And there was people joining him. And I don't really want to get into that because that's not really our story.
Right.
But you realize you're a pastor in your everyday job, and then you walk in and you become Coach B. What is your way of showing these people God without, publicly proclaiming in their locker room the gospel?
Right.
What is your goal in this situation?
Really, it's the same goal I had as a youth pastor.
Yeah.
I want these players to know that I love them. And if students know that you love them, they'll run through a wall for you.
Yeah.
They'll listen to you. Last year we had a player who we were at a away game, and she just was like not there. And it was like space. And I remember because I sit down, I keep records of fouls and timeouts and stuff. So when she got subbed out because she was not playing well, she sat next to me. I'm like, girl, are you even here? And she just had this fog look on her face. And, we won, but she didn't play that well at all. The next day at practice, I just talked to her in the hallway and I said, what's going on? And she said, my dad showed up last night.
Oh, man.
And the way she said it, I went, oh no. And I said, I take it that that's not a good thing. And she looked at me and she goes, my dad has never, ever showed up for anything I've done. I said, it messed you up, huh? She goes, yeah, I was really messed up. And I said, is he involved at all in your life? He goes, no. And I just said, that's too bad. You know why? because you're awesome. And she looked at me like, really? I said, you are awesome. And it's his loss. And she just kind of looked at me, and I said, you know what? Coach B is going to be praying for you all day today. And I felt like I could say that because I'm at the school, but I can tell her that I'm going to pray for her. And she looked at me like, and she said, thank you. But it was a cool little smile on her face. And I just went on.
Yeah.
And this year she sought me out early and said, I want you to have this bracelet. And she's only giving out these, those rubber bands.
Yeah.
And she said, I want you to have it. And she only has given them out to her close friends.
That's awesome. Yeah.
She knows I love them.
Yeah. And it is that, right? Like God says, I am love. He doesn't identify with a whole lot of other words.
Yeah.
He doesn't say I am most anything else. He says I am love. God is love. And so when we represent the love of God well,
right,
that is sharing the gospel in some sense. And what I love about what you get to do is we talk a lot about on our show, our show's pretty young, but we talk a lot about meeting students where they're at.
Oh my goodness.
And if you can be there where it matters, at their games, at their recitals, at their
math bowls.
Math bowls.
I've been to math bowls. You're not living a youth pastor or youth leader until you're at a math bowl.
Yeah, filling it up with the mathletes.
Oh man. Oh yeah.
Yeah. You got to get into their world in order to show them this love that is that
right.
way. And so again, it's not like you're sitting down and you're sharing the 4 spiritual laws with them.
Nope.
It's not like you're sitting there saying, hey, you got to come to my church. What you're doing is you're showing them love that a lot of them have never known, have never seen, and it's just a seed, right? Because they know you're a pastor, and so when things are rough in their life, or maybe it's 5-10 years from now, they're gonna be like, Coach B.
Yep.
Coach B was different, and that seed can turn into gospel truth, and it's more organic. Like I always think, like I see guys out there on the streets with their signs and all that other stuff, and I'm thinking like, how often do people go, okay, now I need to repent now,
Never seen it.
Yeah, it's so away from relationship, right?
Yeah.
Because relationship comes first, right? And maybe you can lay out the model of why do it this way? Why do it that way?
Well, when a student comes to youth group or church, even now, because we have a bunch of teenagers that come and they listen, but it's like when they come to the church or youth group, they know you're supposed to love them.
Yeah.
But when you go out of the building into their world, that's telling them that you love them and showing them. Because you're expected, you're a pastor, but all of a sudden you're showing up at my game. Oh my goodness, you show up at my concert. You show up in something I'm doing, and I remember students like, but I never get in the game. I said, I know, but you're on the bench, and I think you're awesome. And then I know what's going on in their life, their team, and so to get into their world helps students listen when they're in the church world.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm going to listen to this guy or this volunteer. I'm going to listen to them because I know they care for me. So it just takes it to a whole nother level of, same old thing. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's such, it could become trite, but it's so dead on true.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, cliches, they get repeated, they get watered down. But if you actually just think about that one just for 10 seconds, it's still mind-blowing.
It is.
It's like, you don't really want, and this is, the best salesmen know this, right? Like the best salesmen know that they're not selling a product, they're selling themselves. So they've distorted that, right? Like, so salesmen are like, hey, and a good salesman will tell you who they are before they even tell you what the product is, right? And so, and I'm not saying that's what we need to be as salesmen for the gospel, but these tactics are being employed in the worst ways. Right. And so we actually have living water. We actually have the best product out there. And so we should be the people who are putting our life into things. And that's what I love about what you're talking about.
I was talking to my youth staff, actually, in every church. The first church I was started at, I had 10 kids if everybody showed up. In a church of like 75.
Yeah.
And when we left to come here at this church back in the day, the church hadn't really grown, but we had 65 students, like every Sunday.
Yeah.
And the church was 90. Do the math.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a budget. And I told my staff then, why are students coming? And they've learned over time, they're coming here because they know someone loves them.
Yep.
And then I came here, and the youth group here was 35, bunch of church kids, and they hated each other. And I wanted to go back to my other youth group.
Yeah.
But God called me here and eventually changed to, and I do surveys all the time, how many are church, unchurched? And this was like 99% churched.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Fullerton in 2000, we had about 180 plus students, and 50% their parents came to church, and 50% their parents didn't go to any church.
Wow.
And a lot of salvations. And I told the staff, we have a youth budget, but it's not that much. Why are students coming and bringing their friends? Because they know they're loved. And then going to a mega church, so all these kids, and they were arrogant, Orange County, all white pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was like, we got 450. And I'm like, we need to grow. And they're like, why? We're big enough. And I said, go to a Brea football game on Friday nights, and you'll realize how small our youth group is.
Yeah.
And the same percentage, about 95% were church kids. And 5 years later, it was almost 50%. We were up to 750 students, and a lot of them, about half of them, their parents didn't go to church, but they came. And I told the staff, why are they coming? Well, because they know they're loved. It just works.
I love it. And so you talked a little bit there about ratio. I mean, so you want to get this ratio down to a place. Now there is a place, and my history is I came in a very similar way. I started in a tiny little church, moved to a little bigger church, and now in a big church. But one of the things that I noticed about a lot of my ministries was they were predominantly unchurched kids. I mean, just our whole youth group was pretty much like that way, and that came with its own problems,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Discipleship in that context is you got to adjust your expectations constantly. But what do you think? Like, if you're gonna look out there and you're talking to youth workers here, you're talking to youth pastors, you're talking to counselors here. What is a good ratio for that person, the student who knows the gospel, for the person who doesn't know the gospel? What is a perfect ratio in your opinion?
Well, just on my experience, when we had close to a 50-50 ratio, the church kids were fired up. If it's higher than that, they're apathetic. And because
it's higher than that on what side?
More church.
More church.
The more churched your group is, my experience at every, especially the last two, the arrogance and apathy is higher. As even at Fullerton now, all of a sudden, about 50% were church kids and unchurched. And what happened is their friends now were coming.
Yeah.
And when a church kid has an unchurched friend coming, their whole view changes. I mean, the same thing with adults here at our church. When you have a friend that they know they don't have church, they're like, okay, I hope everybody's friendly to my friend. I hope the worship band kicks butt. And Barry, you better bring a good one, right? Because now they're not looking at, oh, I'm bored, or feed me. Now they're thinking through the lens of their friends, and it changes the dynamic of the youth group.
And it's ownership, right? Like, I mean, they start to own it. If like their friends are coming, I'm invested.
Right, because if my youth group looks bad, I look bad.
Yeah.
If the youth group's not friendly, that looks bad on me. So it all changes. So I did surveys all the time to keep my pulse on, especially the larger it gets, you can't know every student. Yeah. You're experiencing that now. I constantly took, surveys probably every year in a youth group. Big church now, we got another one coming out in January. Okay. But I want to have a pulse. Who's coming and why are they coming?
All right. So our next segment, and this is what we usually ask people who come on, is to what's in your office. And we're not in Barry's office. It's just a little easier for me to set my gear up in my office. So what did you bring for us today, Barry, and why?
I brought this. This is in my wall. It's a huge poster from EV Free. It's called Tombstone. And what we did, every summer, we were known for in Southern California, because of all, Hollywood, and we're right there, is we made a full-on production video to launch our new year. Like, so in June, got the new freshmen coming in, And we called it Kickoff Sunday, and we would have an hour or 50 minutes, hour-long video. I mean, we had guys at USC that would edit, and we would produce it. And this one was the last one. And so what we did on this one was all about grace, the tension between law and grace, because we were going to do a study in Romans for summer. Yeah. And so we wrote a deal, and it was fun. We rented a tombstone.
Yeah. I mean, so just for you guys who are just listening to the audio, this is it's a poster, and it looks just like a movie poster. It's got
totally movie.
It's got Barry in it, and it's got some of his youth staff, I'm guessing, and it's Tombstone, right? Which was probably which was the big movie.
Big movie. That time. So yeah, we got the guns, the rifles, the hats, the jackets, the badges. Yeah. We were out at some rock quarry, but. And then when on the Sunday of Kickoff Sunday, we would have students spend the night in the lobby. We had a massive lobby to get a good spot in the amphitheater.
So they would stand. They would
They're sleep. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
That's so awesome.
So we had to bring in donuts and stuff, and then we'd open the doors, and then inside the amphitheater was the whole backdrop was wood, and the entrances on the sides up front were the like the saloon, doors and. Yeah. And so we had some lights that scenes in there. But on that one, what was meaningful to me was because we write the script ourselves, I wrote in that I was going to turn in my badge and move up to a place called Silverdale. And when I turned in my badge, this is youth pastor's dream. I literally in the movie walked off into the sunset out of youth ministry. And when I turned in my badge and I had students crying, my staff crying afterwards, we knew you were leaving, but how come you did that to us? But it was, for me, leaving youth ministry, God had to pull and yank youth ministry out of my hands because I so loved it, and I still do. But to become a lead pastor was all about obedience. And so for me, I was like that picture of a runner running a marathon, and I ran through the tape. Yeah. I know a lot of guys, after so many years of ministry, they just stumbled and faded. Yeah. And I felt like I was leaving youth ministry at its highest, the most fruit, and literally walked off in the sunset.
Oh my goodness! I've never heard that story before. I love that. I love that story. That's amazing that you actually got the cliche Hollywood ending to your youth ministry career right here.
That's right.
I mean, how none of us are gonna get that.
Top that, buddy.
Yeah. Who else gets to do that? So that's super super awesome. And just to recap again, that's me. You're in Orange County. You're in Southern California. Movies are huge deals.
And I had students who were actresses. I had a guy who was a small group leader, and he couldn't do any more because of acting and.
Yeah, and the truth is, I mean, the idea of doing a full length movie, it fit perfectly. That's not something that's probably going to kill in Wyoming.
Probably not.
You might not have the talent to pull
horses.
You could definitely get.
I almost killed a guy. Did you know that?
No.
Because at the what's it called, the west, where the old buildings out. I'm spacing here on podcasts.
What is it? It's.
Old town. Oh, okay. Ghost town. So we actually rented a ghost town.
Okay.
And we brought in horses.
To make this movie, you rented a ghost town.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, and outside Bakersfield. And the horses, we had our horses that we were, using as, part of the deal. Bucked. I scared the horse with my jacket that the wind took up, and it ran over one of my main leads, and almost killed him.
Oh my goodness!
And my daughters almost got ran over. I've never had fear like that ever before. Really? But everybody lived.
You almost didn't get to walk out into the sunset.
I almost made the evening news. My number one youth ministry rule was never make the evening news. Oh, man. And I almost did.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's awesome. That's cool. What an incredible thing. And like I said, guys, you got to know your audience. You got to know what's going to kill with your people. So you think about what are the kids in my area into, and how do I get into that stuff too? There's a lot of youth pastors who are resilient to that. They don't want to don't want to jump in. Some of the stuff they see is worldly, you know, some of the other stuff.
Leverage what's familiar.
Yeah, yep.
For the gospel.
You got one more thing for us here.
This is probably my most special memory at Fullerton. As I was leaving youth ministry, we had an amphitheater, which as a communicator, it's the best.
Yeah.
You're down low, and they wrapped, you know, around you 3/4 of the way. And when I started there,
and we're gonna get that here, right, Barry?
that would be serious. I still miss that because you're right on top of your crowd.
Yeah.
And what's meaningful to me is when I started in 2000. Again, all church kids. No one brought their Bibles. They didn't care.
Yeah.
And they weren't inviting their friends. And this is a picture someone took that gave me. I didn't even know what was going on. Near the end, it is just slammed with about 700 students.
That's awesome.
And the ethnicity that we did not have.
Yeah.
We have right here. We got some African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, all the way through. And if you zoom in closely, you see tons of Bibles, and they're listening to God's word. And so this was the epitome of fruit of a lot of pain and labor to get there, but it's awesome.
And just to think about that idea, 700 students are there, you know, and you were high school down there, right?
Just high school,
high school. And so, I mean, even in the context of now, you know, 12 years later, that seems so crazy. You know, it seems so crazy.
God.
And you know, a church that's got 700 people in it is considered, you know, doing all right. You know? But a youth ministry that's killing it on that level, that's awesome, and that's such a testament to a heart that says, we got to turn these inward eyeballs outward, you know, and we have to go get these people. And what's cool about that picture, and this is what's really cool, when you do turn the eyeballs out of your students, it becomes their success. Yeah. You know, like you get to tell it, and it's a success for you. But when the students own that success, you know, when they see the packed room and realize that's their friends and their work and that stuff happens.
I didn't invite those kids; they did.
Yep.
But I did create an atmosphere for that, and I feel like that's our job as youth pastors, to till the soil, pull the rocks, plant the seeds, create the atmosphere for growth. Because you build a greenhouse effect. Yeah. Something will grow. Yeah. It can't help it. But it's what you're creating. Yeah. Creating the atmosphere where the students are loved, God's word will be taught. Yeah. And it's going to be cool. It's super sweet.
So there's always a surprise question at the end, a question that's maybe a little.
I got one.
One question for me. Okay.
One story though that I think is really important for this venue is we had what was referred to in Fullerton as the smoking ministry.
Okay, the smoking ministry.
The smokers.
Yeah.
So outside our amphitheater, around the corner where we had all of our storage, we had 2 full, garages that went up, and one of them. We changed and moved storage and turned it into a meeting area for a bunch of students that would refuse to come in to the lobby or the amphitheater. There's about 20 students who runaways, on drugs. Most of them have been abused, and I had it's called the smokers because you'd see them lighting up and there's all this smoke around that corner. And I had parents dropping their kids off in their BMWs, and they said, "When are you gonna stop that bunch of those smokers?" I said, "It's not gonna happen," because we found some leaders who had been through drugs, who've gone on the other side, loved Jesus, and they ministered to them. And occasionally we'd have a few come into the lobby, especially when we brought comedians. We brought an inner city black dance team, and all of a sudden here's a bunch of those kids coming in, and we got a couple of them to go to camp, that never happened before I came. Now, I'm not getting credit. I just empowered the leaders like I believe in you, but I got lots of flack of like, we don't want those kids, and I said Jesus wants them. And so.
And that is a real struggle when you turn inward eyeballs outward and you start they start coming through your doors. There are high-end church families that are going to look at your ministry and say, "Not my kid. My kid's not going to be there because I don't want my kid influenced." And it comes from actually a pretty great spot in their heart, right? Like, you want to protect your kid.
Yeah, it's fear, but protective.
Yeah. It isn't like. it isn't always a bad thing, because I mean, we all as parents, like, there's places we don't want our kids to go, you know.
Right.
But one of the things that you have to do is you have to pitch vision, not just to students, but to parents.
And once they heard the stories and what God was doing, they backed off.
Yeah, and here's the thing is, we look for big miracles, right? We look for the 700 kids showing up. We look for the kids sleeping in the lobby. We look for, the crazy thing. But when you tell that story, I think, and maybe it's just me and what I am, but I think the miracle of a kid going from the smoking ministry to walking into the church lobby.
That was right there a huge victory, just to get in the lobby.
Yeah.
And then when they started coming to the amphitheater, it's like, whoa.
I mean, and it's so tangible, right? Like, I was out there, and now I'm in here. It's like lost and found is right built into that. So that's awesome. Thank you for that story. That's perfect.
You got time for one more story?
Yeah.
My first ministry, I had this kid who was just a pest.
Yeah.
Just the most irritating kid that you have. I mean, he's pantsing seniors, and I had to, break up a fight. And I was like, dude, you deserved it, but don't ever do that again. I mean, he was picking on the girls, and he was problem. His name was Chuck Rush. And then I find out his dad was killed as a sheriff. And his mom's a single mom, and she's a sheriff. Wow. So then the only way he would get to church is if I would go pick him up. So I would drive 20 minutes, my truck.
Is this in Fullerton?
This is Vancouver, my first ministry.
First one, okay.
And he would come, and students didn't like him. I didn't like him at times, but I began to love him. And, he was just one of those kids. He just kept coming, got baptized, saved and baptized. But because of no dad in his life, he was always out of control.
Yeah.
I move on. Years later, actually decades later, I'm back up here as a lead pastor. And I'm just really discouraged. I'm at a one-day conference with Andy Stanley and Greg Rochelle over in Seattle, and I'm just really down. The first session. And, am I really making a difference?
Yeah.
So there's a break. You go out to the lobby. I'm in line to look at the books, and I get a tap on my shoulder. I turn around, and guess who it is? Chuck Rush.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I said, what's going on? He goes, you have no idea. I'm a youth pastor now. And I think back to all the times you picked me up and how you loved me when I was so irritating. But I got saved and baptized, and now I'm a youth pastor. And I just started crying. And God was like, that outcast is now serving me, and you played a little part. And so my whole perspective, like, okay, I am making a difference, but it was God.
And you think about that in the...
That's a legacy that I want.
Yeah, Vancouver was probably, you just getting started.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know at that point, know, and you're just doing it. And on those little contexts with those little tiny churches, I was in one too. It's like,
it's so important.
It's so important, but it's also there's hard days where you doubt your calling, you doubt what you're doing, you doubt those things. And the truth is, there's a lot of young guys that are going to listen to this podcast, and they're going to hear that story, and they're going to go,
it really does make a difference.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And
keep cheering you on, man. And all you guys out there in the trenches, keep doing what God's called you to do. It's really worth it.
Yeah. All right. Go check out his book, Dream House, Barry Bandera. All right, so Sonny, obviously I was at that interview, and it was my joy to be there. And you guys listen to it later. What are some things that stood out to you from what Barry was talking about?
I think he referenced what I said earlier, and what I heard on Herman's podcast about you gotta leverage culture to reach the kids you're working with, and that culture changes, state by state, city by city, sometimes even different parts of cities, right? And so I loved his movie thing that he did, because he was in Southern California. He had people in his youth group that were tied into USC and all those kind of places. And so he leveraged the culture around him and did the movie thing, right? And I thought that was epic. That's just genius insight right there, right? And so, I think sometimes we see a lot of Southern California youth ministry, right? And we all, Southern California, palm trees and beautiful weather and burritos and tacos. and they do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes that doesn't translate into Kansas or Illinois or Michigan or something like that. Sometimes it does. You know, extreme bingo can be played anywhere. But what are you doing in your ministry or wherever you work? Are you paying attention enough to the culture of your kids, and are you leveraging that culture to win over your kids, right? That's why 2 years ago we started this music program, because every kid I work with is into rap music and they all think they can rap. So I was like, all right, so we'll build a studio. Here you go. And so I learn all their music. I learn what they like, what they don't like. I'll make beats and I'll give it to them. And so I use music as a form of narrative therapy for them in lyric writing to help them get over like their past traumas and stuff like that, and also give them a chance to look cool in front of their friends and stuff, you know. And it's killed it. It's killed.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that idea of leveraging culture in order to, you know, get access to their lives, in order to get permission to speak these gospel truths into their lives. I love all of that stuff, and I think that's huge, and I think that's hugely who me and you are. And when you're talking about the Fringe kid, when you're talking about Fringe student ministry, that's what you got to do. There's no other way to do it. But here's the thing is, and I want to say this because I think that sometimes, you know, we can get so far down that road that it comes off artificial. It comes off like lit, you know, like a 34-year-old saying lit, you know. I learned
bros,
that,
be lit AF. Yeah.
I learned that this week. You know, I did a right before Christmas. I did a 1-minute message that I've been doing, and they've been hugely successful. And I spent a little more time on this one because I was like, they're going so well. I've got to, you know, and so I did a little bit more production on the production thing. I thought a little bit more about it, and I thought, you know, I could use this idea of Christmas lights to say, you know, you're the light of the world, and the whole thing could revolve around the last saying, which is, this is lit, right? And I thought, you know, this is gonna be good. This is leveraging culture in this way. But what I mostly got back was like, hey, you know, we don't really say lit anymore.
Lit's out, bro.
and I think what made lit go out was me using it. Like,
probably you killed it.
I think they heard it and they're like, I'm not saying that again, and I don't want to hear him ever say that again. So I'm gonna let him know because I love him, but you know, don't say lit anymore. And there is this balance, right? You know, you gotta leverage culture, but here's the thing: it has to be something you're into too.
Correct.
Like it can't just be like the kids are into this, so I guess I'm there. You know, like I don't know why. It always comes off as the Southern people. I'm sorry if you're listening to this in the South.
We don't have many accents. We're not very talented people, TJ. And that's the easiest way. You just slow down your talking.
Yeah, we're just slowing down there. But you know, there's certain things that the kids are going to be into that you're just not going to be good at. Mm-hmm. And you just can't do it. I had a conversation with someone because I always use Snapchat, and they just literally said, you know, I just don't get Snapchat. And the more I spend on it, the more mad I get. And I'm just like sitting there thinking, like, it doesn't have to be Snapchat. Snapchat was what the 1-minute message worked for me. It was the thing, but you know, find your bridge into their culture. And the great thing about human beings is we're not just one-dimensional. It's not just like it's Snapchat or bust.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. No.
There is all sorts of inroads that you can say, and this is what you did, Sonny. You saw this music inroad. Now, it wasn't like you didn't have to force yourself to become that. That was something that you already were. And so you're leveraging their culture, but you're also using an asset that God's given you. And so you're like, their culture kind of aligns with me in this way. And I've just got to, it's not very hard. It's not a very big bridge you got to build here. Like, that's just not a very big bridge. You know, probably one of the biggest bridges you had to build was, you know, you moving from this hardcore, you know, to the rap stuff. But at the same time, it's that was who you were, and so it comes off as authentic. Yeah. Sometimes we, you know, and I see this a lot, you know, the youth pastors with the haircuts, they're like, obviously
the
16-year-old
Ignatios of the world, if you will, right? That video.
Yeah, I love that video, but I don't think anybody's ever seen it. But if you haven't, go watch Ignacio. It's a little old.
Ignacio, the youth pastor on YouTube. It's epic. Yeah.
Is it Ignacio or Ignatius? Ignatius.
Oh, Ignatius. Yeah.
Ignatius. There it is. But anyway, yeah, sometimes it comes off as disingenuine. And so you got to find your inroads. And so, like, who am I and who are the kids and how can I align myself to them and, again, do what they love? And not everything that they love is something you're going to be good at, but find the things that you are good at and leverage those. And that goes to even what Barry was saying. Barry is very good at making videos and very good at directing things like that. And he has got a big picture brain. And so that wasn't it was a hard project for him, but that wasn't a hard step for him to become that.
The other cool thing that he talked about is if a kid knows he's loved, he's going to come back.
Yeah.
And we talked about that in previous episodes, and you hear quite a bit. I listen to other people's podcasts and stuff like that, and you hear sometimes that's not enough. And I don't know if they're coming from a pure, like, if they're not coming back every week, it's a failure. I don't know what their metric is, right?
Yeah.
But I've never known love to fail. Regardless if they come back the following week, you run into them 5 years down the road, you run into them 2 years down the road, whatever. Love always, not trying to quote Rob Bell here, but love wins. You know what I'm saying? Like, love will always win out and stuff, And even if they come for a week and they never come back again, some point in their life, they're going to remember and think back and go, man, that guy really cared about me. Mm-hmm. That guy meant something to me. And again, with all the research around the ACEs and stuff like that, one caring adult has the power to impact and change and reverse a lot of negative effects on a kid's life. And so that story he told at the very end, where he was at the conference and the kid, I think the kid's name was Chuck. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. But the kid tapped him on the shoulder and says, hey, remember me? And that was the kid who was pantsing the seniors, who was the most disrespectful, and that was the most annoying kid in his group. But because Barry had picked him up and took him there, he remembered, and he became a youth pastor, and now he was putting up with the. I mean, that's the story, right? That's like the quintessential moment, right? That you would hope for out of every kid you ever ministered to and stuff. And so, it's love, man. It's love, and especially I think now as we move into a generation where maybe it's due to lawnmower parenting, or maybe it's just due to lack of parenting. A lot of kids aren't feeling love, and this goes back to something I said last week. You give them an experience they don't find anywhere else. You give them a feeling they don't get anywhere else. And you give them caring from an adult, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, like your grandfather. You give them that, they will remember that, and they will need that, and they will reach out, and maybe not to you, but maybe you gave them hope that it can happen, and maybe they'll go somewhere else to get it, But nah, that was epic. I mean, that guy. It's cool to hear him as a senior pastor, or whatever he said he was, speaking like that, because it sounded like me and you were having a conversation, and that was epic. That was cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of youth workers who are going to listen to this, especially youth pastors, and you're going to be like, man, I wish my senior pastor, I wish my pastor, I wish my lead pastor was like that, and I would like to say to you guys, too bad. I'm already here.
Grace Point Church in Bremerton, Washington. Just start sending your resumes in.
Yeah, there's got to be someone better than me for this job.
Don't you have better things to do than listen to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast?
All right, TJ, we're going to skip the pregunta of the week. You know what that means, TJ? Pregunta?
No.
It is not pregnant in Spanish. It is question. It's like your brain has a question and it's full, and so it's pregnant and it's ready to pop. That's why it's called pregunta. Pregunta. If Juan's listening, he'll appreciate that.
Yeah, I like how you said it like an Italian and not like
pregunta.
Pregunta.
Yeah, it's like an Italian, something like that. Italian.
Yeah.
Anyway, question of the week. This is regarding, what's in your office. Youth pastors have eccentric offices, if you will. And I've recently had to spruce my home office up a little bit because I was kind of weak sauce there for a bit. And so I got something, but if you want to go first, go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and grab it.
I am gonna go first, and we talk a lot about this, and it's always a reference point for me and you. But what I'm holding up to the camera right now is a framed T-shirt that says Camp Respawn 2015. This is.
Did you ever notice how you spelled respawn wrong on that?
No, I didn't spell respawn wrong.
You did. Look at it, bro. You never noticed that? I just want you to look. All I want you is to have to look.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm like, I've been wearing this for 4 years, so I bet. Oh, that's awesome, man. And I was sitting there looking even at the camera. I'm like, am I not seeing something here? What's going on here? Like, that's almost worse than.
For the record, he looked at the shirt to double check.
Yes. I did spell it right also for the record. This is the shirt, and I think this is really cool. Camp Respawn is, and we've talked about the show, it's we gave summer camp to the kids that you're working with. So we took summer camp, which is traditionally, well, the summer camps that we were doing were traditionally inside of the church, and we said, no, let's give it to these students, and let's let it be part of their treatment. But the first year that we did Camp Respawn, I think both of us were pretty nervous about it.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember you being incredibly nervous about it. I mean, this is your reputation on the line. No one had really done this in your field, and it was kind of a crazy idea, and there was a lot of risk. And I think that one of the things that was really cool about that was, you leaned into me a lot in my expertise. And in fact, I actually directed that first camp. I was the camp director, which I made the schedule, and I ran the meetings early in the morning, and everything that I could handle legally, I did handle for you at that camp. And it was really kind of a crazy rhythm because that's the way we'd been doing it for years at that point. We'd already run 5 camps together. And I'd always been the director of those camps, and you were always kind of there at those camps. But this was kind of that in-between year where I was still running it, but you were watching. You're in the wings and knowing that this is going to become not just me doing it and you watching. This is going to be now your thing.
Sure.
And so I remember you being nervous. I remember you doing that stuff. But then, 4 years later, Camp Respawn has become your camp. It is 100% your camp, and it's awesome. It doesn't just look like TJ. It doesn't look like a bastardization of TJ. It looks like Sonny. It looks like your leadership style. It looks like what you like, and it looks like your students, who you know better than everybody else. And I look back on that, and the shirt represents awesome, the beginning of something really great, but also it represents a new era in my book for Sonny Saltalamacchia. A time when he wasn't just waiting, but you were ready to lead, and you took a lot of guts to do that. But 4 years into it, it's something really special, amazing, and it's a big blessing. And I can't wait to come back to Camp Respawn 2014, which is nuts.
The best story. We're 5 episodes deep, so we're going to tell a story now. The best story of that camp is we recruited a lot of church volunteers for that camp, and one of them in particular was a lady, I think in her 50s at the time or something like that, and she'd been a great help.
You're not going to talk with a dog here.
A great support.
No,
just a great help for camp.
We already cut this out of an episode.
Anyway, so late one night she calls, and this is Fringe kids, right? She had not interacted with these type of kids very much.
Come on, man.
So she calls me over one night about 11 o'clock. And the boys are sleeping. The guys, she goes, Sonny, get over here. And I go, what? And she goes, you need to go to that tent right now. I'm like, what's going on? She goes, they're going to do something bad. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? They goes, they want to go have sex with TJ's dog. And she was serious. She was 100% serious. Because the kids, they were talking about doing weird things with TJ's dog.
Because they're smack talkers. Because that's who they are. They're all talk.
English bulldog with him or something like that. And she thought they were serious. And bless her heart, I love that lady still to this day. Bless her heart, I was like, we're okay. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was like her first introduction really to like hardcore Fringe kids, unchurched. Like it was rough.
Well, I mean, it was
funny.
Up until that point, we had a few of them that started coming to our camps, like the church camps. Yeah. So she had gotten a little introduction to them, but this was
a baptism by fire.
Yeah, this was a tearing off of the Band-Aid here, But at the end of that, I remember she came up with a rap and even rap battled some of these kids. It did come full circle for her, and it was an awesome experience to watch her bloom into.
And that's what I think. Sometimes it's always beneficial to the kids when somebody comes and cares and loves on them.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's even equally, if not more beneficial to the person doing the loving on the kid, because they realize these are just kids. And when you get past their story of trauma, or the story of, maybe they have a hardcore appearance, they're tatted up, they talk, every other word's an F-bomb. When you can get through all that and you hear the stories behind what they're living, what they've lived through, then you just realize they're just hurt kids, right? Who was that guy who wrote that book a couple years ago called Hurt? Chap Clark.
Chap Clark. Yeah.
I mean, he hit it out of the park. Hurt. Period. And that kind of leads into my office item, TJ. I'm holding up a picture of my father in the early 1980s flipping off Denver Mile High Stadium. Because my dad was a hardcore Raiders fan, born and raised in San Jose, California. And he did a job up there in Denver. He was living up there. I think they were living up there when I was like 1 or 2. And so he took this picture. He did a job close by the stadium. His buddy took a picture. And he's just flipping off the stadium. And that's it. And I have it in my office. But it reminds me of my father, who passed away several years ago. But to me, he was the OG Fringe kid. Born in the 50s. He was raised as a Catholic. He was a choir boy, or whatever they're called, in the church. At 8 years old, his father gets cancer. The church tells him, hey, it's okay. Just pray and everything will be okay. My dad prays for 2 years. His father dies at 10. My dad says F you to the church and never looked back again, essentially. Yeah. He lived his whole life, using that substance to alleviate his pain. But then, as I've thought about it more and more, and I've heard more stories about him ever since he passed away, and I've learned more about him, it was my father who really suffered a lot as a kid and had some stuff happen to him that I won't really say on the air here. But on top of losing his own father and what that meant, this is back in the 60s, right? So in 1962, he loses his dad. Well, that was much less common back then to not have a father. And there was 4 kids in the home. The mom had never, my grandma had never even paid a bill and stuff like that, And so it was a pretty taxing situation on the whole entire family, and he dealt with it the best that he could, right? And so, there's recently an article by a guy who works, highly up in addiction medicine, and he said we shouldn't call addictions addiction no more. He said we should call it ritualized, compulsive, problematic behavior or something like that, right? Because we go through these experiences, and they harden us, and so we try to alleviate that pain however we can, and if it's substances or whatever. And so looking at my father reminds me the Fringe kid, right? He went on to he was in California Youth Authority camps and, trouble with the cops and all that kind of stuff. He once told me when I was a kid going through all my rough stuff that there's nothing I could do that would surprise him or shock him. So then I tried everything I possibly could to try to shock him and surprise him. And I think I got him a couple times. And
you did become a Christian at some point.
Yes, I did become a Christian, and then I became a drug and alcohol counselor. And I think that's what ended up killing him. I can't live in this world. But yeah, man, to me, every kid I work with, I just look at as like, I'm like ministering and loving on my father who never had that. And I try to be to the kids that I work with now who my father needed when he was my age and who I needed when I was my age. And so yeah, man, it's just a good reminder. And that rough exterior, flipping off Mile High Stadium, that's who Fringe kids are. But if you get past that, they're just kids. They're just kids.
And I think that what I love about that is it's a story of, a father and a son, which is just incredibly powerful. I mean, just so powerful. And I just want to thank you for sharing that, because that's going to an intimate place there. Sure. It's not easy to talk about some of that stuff. But one of the things that I see in you and I see inside of that story is your dad, has all this traumatic experiences. And then he spends his life self-medicating in negative ways. Sure. He needed medicine. He needed something, and he didn't find it in the church. Unfortunately, he found it in drug and alcohol abuse, and so he kind of hands you this broken legacy, and we've talked about this, me and you, is that you get handed a legacy. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Some of it's things you're gonna have to iron out yourself. But he kind of hands you this broken legacy, and I love that what you do with that broken legacy and the way you self-medicate well, I mean, first of all, burritos is how you self-medicate. Number
Totino's
one, which is
pizzas. Burn the roof of your
and
mouth,
yeah, it's some other things, pizza, yeah. But the other thing is, you medicate in the positive way, which you say, man, I'm looking at these kids that I work with every single day, and I'm seeing my dad in them, and if I can just reach one of them, maybe I can help their kids out in some way. Maybe I can stop a generational sin happening.
Yeah, and then you realize, and I think now becoming a parent, and me and you have talked about this, walking around some track somewhere, you realize your parents give you the best of what they could, you know, and I know both of our dads, the thing my dad gave me more than anything else was that hard work pays off. And if you just grind every single day, it'll pay off for you. And I've seen that play out so many times in my field, in my career, where I just did the extra thing. He once told me, walk to the bathroom fast. So I walked to the bathroom fast, and it pays off, right? They don't know where you're going, but it looks like you're doing something cool. And so, even though your father, whatever, everybody has their own struggles, but there's always something positive you can take from them, And man, I think over the years, as I become a parent and realize, I think we all enter parenting like, I'll never do this and I'll never do that, and all my kids once you have a couple kids,
and then all of a sudden you find yourself, oh my gosh, I just said something my dad said.
Please babysit my kid, TV, right? You break all the rules and stuff, And I think you get a greater appreciation for your parents, even though they may not have given you everything with a silver spoon. But would you really want that? You wouldn't be who you are if you didn't have that resilience.
Well, we definitely didn't have lawnmower parents.
No.
Our parents were making us push that lawnmower.
Yeah, we were lawnmower kids.
Yeah. We were hitting the rocks and Legos, and oh dang it, getting cussed at from the window. Well, that brings us to the end of our 5th episode. I want to thank you for listening out there. Please comment on our social media page. Right now we're rocking the Instagram and the Facebook page. You can look us up. We're on Instagram. We are Fringe_podcast. On Facebook, just type in the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast and you should find our pages. Please join the conversation. If something that we said hit you in a certain way, we want to hear about it. We are kind of just like golden retrievers looking to get a pat on the head. So if you could just do that by commenting on our Facebook page, we would really, really like it. Otherwise, we're just going to be standing here looking at our screens, wagging our tails.
Hitting
wondering,
F5 refresh. Oh, TJ, somebody liked it.
Somebody liked it. Somebody out there likes us, Sonny.
Some rando likes us. Yes. Yeah, my feelings are validated regardless of what my wife says, who knows me intimately.
That's right, man. But yeah, this has been the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. I'm TJ McConaughey, my co-host, Sonny Saltalamacchia.
Fringe out.
You've earned your gold star. Thank you for listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.